Welcome back to another episode of Pain Points, where the world meets business. This week's podcast is sponsored by every great American country in the last 50 years with that theme music.
Yeah, heck yeah. That's such a great song.
Well, every week we come to you guys and we bring you the story, the news, the clips and videos that are relevant to you in your ever-changing landscape of entrepreneurship. And boy, do we have quite a bit for you today. And so I'm excited. Samson, Jagoras, how are you this morning?
I'm good, bro. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. We're going to try something a little different this morning.
Yeah.
We're going to kick it off with two of our funniest clips of the week. I just need...
These are legit LOLs.
Yeah, they really are. And so if you're listening, you'll be able to catch it. But even more so if you're watching, you'll enjoy these. So we're going to kick us off with the funniest clips of the week here. This first one comes courtesy of NYU.
And what would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure do you know what NYU's doing? About what? About Israel.
At least she's honest.
Here.
She got about...
more educated. I'm not either.
Oh.
I came from Columbia. I was there up at Columbia, and we came down. They said NYU students needed our support, so I came down. I heard there's lots of cops. Some people were saying it was getting dangerous.
Wow. Okay.
She got about 3 seconds into her response, and you can see her eyes go, I don't have any idea what we're actually protesting.
It got real in that moment for her. That's what happened. That was like that, those moments where you just kind of just confess.
I'm gonna be proud. I'm proud of her though. She owned it, because most of them would be like, I'm not having this conversation with you.
Both of them were being honest, but it's still not a good look.
It's not a good look, and just a testament to what's happening across all the campuses.
Yeah, and so if you just happen to be those two ladies, you're watching this, follow that through with the courage to go somewhere else. Just because. Yeah,
well, we bring stuff like that up just because that's your future workforce. So if you're an entrepreneur,
man, that's
what you got to be prepared to deal with. No, I mean, we're definitely not talking about Cole and Trevor by any means, because those guys didn't even go to college.
Yeah.
Thank God.
We only get the best.
So we caught them before they got indoctrinated.
All right.
So they're good.
Clip number 2 here. Let's go number 2. This is courtesy of Drew Barrymore. And you know what, guys? This is what the nation needs at the moment. It's very clear.
I've been thinking that we really all need a tremendous hug in the world right now. Yeah. But in our country, we need you to be Mamala of the country.
Look how she's like, she doesn't even know how to respond. Oh, right.
And that is pretty special or spectacular for Kamala to not know how to respond to that.
I mean, I think she's looking like, I can't believe she just said that to me. I think that's really what it is. But think about this. I don't have the right framing of but it's funny how, I want to say liberals, but they get super emotional as if they're saying something really profound, and it actually makes no sense at all, right? And it's like, we need a hug in this moment from Mamala. Well, what we actually need is the Vice President of the United States to take part in leading our nation out of this mess.
Yeah, correct.
Mamala,
Not going on the Drew Barrymore show.
Yeah. Haven't been to the border, doing nothing, but yet your own talk shows.
Yeah, well, that's actually a great setup for kind of where we're going with today's podcast for you guys as entrepreneurs, what we need to be paying attention to, things that we should be thinking about. And I think the first topic that I want to bring up was kind of what happened over the last week was this proposed new capital gains tax rate from our boy.
I don't even got it.
Dadin and Mamala. Joe Biden proposes a 44% capital gains tax. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, which I highly doubt as entrepreneurs, but one of the incentives to being an entrepreneur, buying and owning real estate, building a business, is the ability to participate in long-term capital gains, building wealth, and being able to sell that business at some point in the future and not be hit with ordinary income, right? If I sell a business for $5 million, I'm going to be instantly in the highest tax bracket. But with the current capital gains rate, I can pay 15%. And so,
and that's by way of you putting in that investment, waiting the time, building jobs, business, like investing in the nation, essentially.
Yeah. The whole objective of doing that is to encourage money to stay into the market, right? To encourage the capital markets, to encourage people to hold real estate long-term, to encourage business owners to create jobs. In a capitalistic society, the government relies on us to do two main things: create jobs, provide housing. And so the capital gains rate is designed to protect that and incentivize that. The long-term repercussions of that, if that actually goes through, is you're going to disincentivize those things.
Now, this is the highest on record supposedly proposed, right?
Correct. Yeah. So let's actually get some of the commentary. So this is coming from Americans for Tax Reform, which is atr.org. Mm-hmm. And here's what was actually said. So this is a direct quote. Together, the proposals would increase the top marginal rate on long-term capital gains and qualified dividends to 44.6%. Yes, you read that correctly. A Biden top capital gains dividend tax rate of 44.6%. Under the Biden proposal, the combined federal state capital gains tax exceeds 50% in many states. California will face a combined federal state rate of 59%, New Jersey 55.3%, Oregon at 54.5%, Minnesota at 54.4%, and New York at 53.4%. Worse, capital gains are not indexed to inflation, so Americans already get stuck paying tax on some gains that are not real. It is a tax on inflation, something created by Washington and then taxed by Washington. Biden's high inflation makes this especially painful.
Wow.
Many hardworking couples who started a small business at age 25 who now wish to sell the business at age 65 will face the Biden proposed 44.6% top rate plus state capital gains tax. And much of that gain isn't real due to inflation, but they'll owe tax on it.
Wow, dude.
So to put it in perspective, the proposed Biden top capital gains tax rate is more than twice as high as China's rate, which is crazy coming from a communist country. China's capital gains tax rate is 20%. Is it wise to have higher tax rates than China? And with Biden's combined federal state capital gains rate of 59% in California, residents will face a rate nearly 3 times as high as China. So what's even crazier is California is already crazy. If you sell a piece of real estate using a 1031 exchange in California move into another state, they will follow that transaction for years until you finally sell it in a taxable event so that they can get their share. I mean, it's communist California.
So what, from an entrepreneur's perspective, what is the long-term implications of the United States operating from such a position?
I mean, the long-term, from an entrepreneur's perspective, is it really does disincentivize this desire to go and build businesses, take risks, invest your money into starting a company, buying a company, building a business, owning real estate, so on and so forth. They already did away with, under the same administration, the ability to do bonus depreciation on commercial real estate. Right. And it's been burning off. You used to be able to do 100% in the first year, then it reduced to 80. This year it's 60. And it'll keep reducing by 20% until it's completely gone, unless the next administration comes in and revives that, which I believe if we get a more capitalistic, conservative economic president in there, somebody like Donald Trump, we would see a lot of these things get wiped out because he understands the importance of the capital markets. So the implications are, one of the things we talk about or see is you need to be diversifying along the way as an entrepreneur. You need to be, pulling cash out and deploying it into other things. Sometimes entrepreneurs are just so focused on their one business that they pick their head up 10, 15, 20 years later, and they don't have any other assets. And so that is a potential risk for you if the only thing you have, if the majority of your wealth is just tied up right now in your business.
Yeah. So now this makes me think about the employees and the people who are not in the entrepreneur seat, because a lot of times this gets veiled under the virtue of we're going to tax those who are not paying their fair share.
Yeah.
We're going to rid ourselves of corruption from the wealthy, evading taxes and all of this. But am I wrong in thinking that part of why this is even taking place is because the reckless spending that we're seeing in our government as a combative measure?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably more, we've printed money at an excessive rate for the last 20 or 30 years. Yeah. Which is causing inflation. Some major corporations have taken advantage of it. I mean, the boomer generation has probably benefited the most from it, but like good on them. Power to them, right? They're all getting ready to exit their businesses, right? The baby boomers will be over the age, all of them will be over the age of 65 by 2030. So they'll all be at retirement age. So we're kind of having this culmination of inflation, cheap money, weak leadership, loss of reserve currency, all kind of climaxing at the same time as the greatest wealth transfer in history is about to take place, and $96 trillion will trade hands from the boomers to the next generation.
Yeah. And so it's also important too that people out there who aren't in that seat understand that these types of moves don't get you to have better opportunities within your reach, because it literally impacting the jobs that you'll be working.
The more that the federal government and just the government in general tries to tax, and they don't call it a tax, but put these constraints on business owners who literally make up 1.5 million jobs in this country. It's like 68% of the economy and 44% of all jobs. The more that they try to constrict those people, the less likely they are to bring on full-time W-2s, the more likely they are to hire 1099s or create other solutions that ultimately will remove the need for them. Because entrepreneurs are innovators, right? So they're going to figure out how to play the game, because the game's always changing. So, you're already seeing it happen at the lowest level with AI, self-checkout, those types of things are happening. And you're seeing it move all the way up. We talked about it in the last pod into sales, right? I can leverage AI now to make sales calls on my behalf. Entrepreneurs will figure out how to reduce the overhead costs. So everything that the government is currently doing is the antithesis of what they want, which is jobs and housing.
Right.
And so, it's going to be ultimately a bad thing for the employee. So if you're like pro this, like just watch out, like your head's on the chopping block.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I wanted to hit on. Wow. Dude. Okay. So
real quick though, before we segue, because this is the better segue, I want to pull up this chart, which is, it's the big cycle chart. So this is a chart that was created by Ray Dalio. Mm-hmm. And so Ray Dalio talks about these huge, what he calls big cycles or economic cycles, and they last about 100 years or so. It's the same thing for a generational cycle. So a generation has come and gone. If you've read The Fourth Turning, you've read Ray Dalio's book, you would kind of understand this. But the beginning of this chart where it says New Order, so we'll call it 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this chart. Mm-hmm. Strong leadership, number 1. Inventiveness, number 2. Education, number 3. Strong culture, number 4. 5, good resource allocation. Even 5.5, good competitiveness. That was circa into World War II. Okay. So World War II ended in 1945. So on the opposite side of this chart, number 18, the New World Order, right? If we're talking about 100-year cycle, one generational cycle later, that means the end of this chart is 2045. That means the top of this chart at number 10, right? So you go from strong competitiveness, number 6, to strong income growth, number 7, strong markets and financial centers, number 8, to number 9, we're less productive. Number 10, we're overextended. That would be circa 1996, call it 2000. What happened in 2000?
.com
bubble, right?
Yeah.
So at 11, you're losing competitiveness, 12, wealth gaps, 13, large debts, 14, printing money.
Which we've seen the most printing money in the last
15, internal conflict, 16, loss of reserve currency. You are here. So everybody listening to this podcast, you are at 16. We can all agree we've incurred large debts. We're gaining $1 trillion in debt every 90 days. Right now as a country, we just passed a $1.2 million infrastructure bill that'll get us till October.
Right.
We're printing money at an insane rate. They claim that we're not, but if you actually go look at how much money we're printing, it's a lot. Internal conflict. I think culturally we can agree we've had more internal conflict than ever. And then we're seeing countries like the formation of BRICS,
right,
where Brazil and these other countries are coming together in order to remove themselves from the US dollar. You're seeing China sell US debt and start buying gold. You're seeing Russia work with Iran to create their own cryptocurrency that's backed by gold in an attempt to remove themselves off the dollar. And I think we can all attest to weak leadership. I mean, like unbelievable weak leadership. And so the final straw in every one of these cycles all ends the same way, which is civil war and revolution.
Anarchy. Yeah.
And it doesn't always mean like physical guns and shooting, but revolution. Hey, so if you're a regular listener of the show, you know that we believe in entrepreneurs. In fact, we are calling you guys to regularly take action in your community and in this country. And entrepreneurs are going to be the way that we move this country forward. Well, with that said, entrepreneurs make up 70% of the economy. And there is a massive opportunity on the horizon, which is buying businesses. Literally thousands of small to medium-sized businesses are coming to the market and looking for entrepreneurs just like you to buy them. The problem is it's incredibly challenging and fragmented and hard to navigate. That's why we created Clearly Acquired. It is a marketplace that connects brokers and their listings and buyers with community, education, finance, weekly coaching calls, monthly webinars, weekly newsletters, and ultimately one-on-one coaching to help you buy your next business. Let's face it, most of us are not going to go on to build an Uber or a Twitter or a Facebook. Most of us are going to end up in boring businesses, but that's where the real money will be made. Boring businesses. We're talking HVAC, contracting, concrete, people that are really creating and building this economy. So if that sounds interesting to you, head on over to clearlyacquired.com where you can sign up for a free 14-day trial and join the community. From there, you'll start connecting with other buyers, brokers, listings, get access to the course, join the weekly coaching calls, and ultimately be on your way to buying your next business, right? And so I think that's a kind of a perfect segue into this next topic, which is trending this week, which is Ray Dalio talking specifically about how do you know when a currency is collapsing.
Indicators of when a fiat currency is going to decline into collapse is when those who are holding its debt sell the debt and the government, central bank, has to print money to buy that debt in large size while that's going down.
So 16, 17.
Those are the most important indicators. So that you can see it, again, I want to repeat, selling the debt so that there's a big supply-demand imbalance and the central bank having to come in there and buy the debt that no one else will buy in large quantity so that then there's a currency devaluation. You have those three things aligned, the currency devaluation going down at the same time as those other two things are happening. And that's been a classic. It's like a bank run. They come to the bank, there's not enough money in the bank, and so they have to make up the difference by the printing of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
And so I did a Google search after watching that, and we're coming to you from Investopedia. 5 foreign countries that own the most U.S. debt.
Mm-hmm.
So coming in at number 1.
Drum roll.
Japan. Japan held $1.15 trillion in treasury securities as of January 2024. Number 2, China. China gets a lot of attention for holding big chunks of U.S. government's debt, given that its economy expanded rapidly in the last decades. Perhaps shouldn't come as a surprise. China takes the second spot behind Japan among foreign holders of U.S. debt at $797.7 billion in treasuries. The United Kingdom. So British investors hold $753.5 billion of U.S. debts as of January 2024. Luxembourg, number 4, is the 4th largest holder of the debt. And it looks like they are holding $376.5 billion in U.S. treasuries. And then coming in at number 5 is U.S.'s neighbor to the north, Canada, which holds $339.8 billion in U.S. debt. So kind of looking at the previous chart that we talked about, loss of a reserve currency, why would these countries own so much of the U.S. currency?
Well, that was gonna be my question.
Because it's the best currency in a bad neighborhood, right? For post-World War II, the United States was the strongest currency and economy. And in the middle of all that, we backed off of the gold-backed currency via Bretton Woods. For a long time, all settlement of crude oil, which I would be considered probably one of the most precious resources or assets out there, was settled in US dollars. For the first time, I believe it was last year, and I can't remember the exact country, but a country decided to settle in non-US dollars. They were trying to break away from that, hence BRICS being formed and all that good stuff. And so we are seeing that countries do not like to be attached to the United States. So that is a con for us. If we are printing copious amounts of money, we have no one to sell it to.
Right.
The benefit to us as entrepreneurs and capitalists in this country is we are moving back to a time more similar to World War II, pre-World War II, where the United States did not participate in the greater economy, right?
Now, are we moving there because that's actually going to be the only way to survive? Or-
Yes. And I also just think that it's out of necessity. Like post-World War II, Europe was in shambles. And so they needed somebody, in order to rebuild, you have to be able to produce and create an economy where you sell things, et cetera, and sell them to someone. So we became a consumer economy. We're moving away from that. We're now a net producer of oil and gas. We're bringing manufacturing stateside. It is now cheaper to actually manufacture in Mexico than it is to manufacture in China. And so it's kind of just very telling for where we're going is these countries kind of unwind themselves for us, and the United States becomes a net producer. And effectively, if you guys haven't read Peter Zion's book, I cannot tell you enough about it, but we have more navigable waterways, more farmland, more oil and gas than any other country in the world. And so effectively, we don't need to participate if we don't want to. And so it'll be rocky as we unwind because we're in the fourth quarter of this 100-year cycle and the end of this big cycle, as Ray Dalio would call it.
So for the entrepreneur out there, does it go back to your previous point about diversification as we are in this phase, as we're looking at that end of the cycle?
Yeah, I think it yes and no. I think that it's no surprise that we're seeing increases in taxes, right? Because as the government runs out of ways, they have a couple levers, interest rates and printing money. And so when they can't do that anymore, they just start to increase taxes. They couldn't increase taxes enough to overcome $1 trillion of debt a quarter. So the question becomes, why are we still paying taxes, right? The pro to that is there's still 5,800 pages in the tax code, of which 30 are only dedicated to paying taxes. So there's still a benefit to being an entrepreneur. But yes, you should be diversifying. So if you're young in the game at the moment, or at least mid-career, like don't keep all your eggs in that basket. Please keep expanding outside of it. But I don't know if I have the perfect answer for what you're trying to get at. But
yeah, mostly I'm just thinking about I'm thinking about the entrepreneurs who maybe they have a tendency to just, like you said, focus on just the business, and there's this bigger picture happening that has a potential to be a tsunami, a negative tsunami on the business.
Right.
And so I think mostly I was just getting at that. And even as we segue to our next point, stuff like this next topic about like Bitcoin, as we talk about when we pose the question, should businesses be putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet following Michael Saylor,
Yeah. Well, I think that is, if you have a currency that's losing its value, de-dollarization globally, which isn't entirely true, but just people are less attracted to the dollar than they used to be. It kind of starts to beg the question is like, what is our dollar actually worth? And if it's a dollar backed by nothing, how do we unwind from $1 trillion of debt a quarter? How do we unwind excessive asset prices, inflation, and now high interest rates? Prices haven't really adjusted to accommodate that. So how do we unwind it? I don't know. Is the answer a currency reset? Maybe, maybe not. Is it moving to a CBDC and removing so much physical dollars out of the supply? I don't actually know. I just know that it might be a good idea to consider some alternatives.
Correct.
Right. And so this next one is coming from Michael Saylor, and he's explaining MicroStrategy's decision to issue more stock to take on more debt in order to buy more Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And I think it's confusing to people because they get too caught up in, I don't understand this thing, or what's the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. Just put it like this. If you could go back to 1985 and instead of building a company on top of the internet, you could own a piece of the internet, and for every company that was built on top of that internet, your stake grew in value, would you do it? And the answer is probably yes.
No-brainer.
So with that as the premise, we'll listen to what Michael Saylor has to say, and then just take into consideration that it might be good strategy for you.
Yeah.
Right. The conventional wisdom is when you sell stock, you dilute the shareholders. But in our case, the more stock we issue or the more money we raise, the more we accrete. And so hundreds of thousands of companies have assets on their balance sheet which are dilutive. And Bitcoin is the first major asset which is accretive. So we turn the entire treasury strategy upside down by actually accreting assets. Today we have $15 billion of Bitcoin on the balance sheet.
50. Oh.
And the operating company generates $75 million a year in cash flow. And the operating revenues are $500 million. So we made the balance sheet the primary part of the company instead of the P&L. Everybody else wants the balance sheet to go to zero or negative, and they want the P&L to be the primary part of the company. Like the conventional wisdom is when you sell stock, you dilute the shareholders.
So what he's essentially saying is we fortified our company.
Effectively, and that is, I guess, the argument is people who believe that it is an accretive asset and those who believe that it's a complete farce. And I don't necessarily have the answer, but I will say that from what I understand about it, it is a rare thing to ultimately own. I think the biggest challenges for Bitcoin are probably on the front of just mining, electricity, the ability, computing power, the ability to actually continually mine these things. But that's also what makes it precious and rare, right? There's a limited amount that'll ever be created, and it does get more challenging with each successive halving, where they cut the supply in half, to actually mine those, while simultaneously computing power hasn't kept up. And so those things make it more rare.
Yeah. And I see just from that clip, the implication being for the business owner is that you can get creative in doing things that protect your business from the economic uncertainties that we're facing.
Right.
Like, yeah. I mean,
so I wanted to go down the rabbit hole, though, just kind of talking about this, going further on this topic of de-dollarization. So if you guys don't know about visualcapitalist.com, it's incredible because it takes
heard of it.
Very complicated, or what feels like complicated topics, and tries to put them into these really easy to understand visuals. So the first one we're looking at is de-dollarization. What is de-dollarization? The process of substituting the US dollar as a currency used for trading commodities and other goods and services. And they walk you through a timeline of dollar dominance. So in 1920, the dollar begins to displace the pound sterling as an international reserve currency after the First World War. In 1944, international trade is conducted using the US dollar under the Bretton Woods Agreement. 1971, this is the big one, President Nixon ceases the direct convertibility of US dollars to gold. So it took it off the gold back. 1960s, European and Japanese exports become more competitive with US exports. There is a large supply of dollar around the world, making it difficult to back dollars with gold. So there's now more in circulation than you could actually have in supply of gold. 1981, after years of hyperinflation, why am I so winded? The US dollar loses
It's funny, all those times I'm like, why am I so winded? And he's just laughing at me.
Okay. After years of hyperinflation, the US dollar loses 2/3 of its purchasing power. From 2007 to 2008, the global financial crisis, investors seek US dollars, expecting the currency to retain its value. So the flight to safety is what they would have called it when I was on the trading desk in 2008 through 2011, it was the best house in a bad neighborhood. All the other countries were experiencing the same thing, except the dollar was holding strong against everything else. 2014, following the annexation of Crimea from Russia, prioritizes de-dollarization in response to Western sanctions. 2023, this is the big one. Brazil, Argentina discussed the creation of a common currency. The UAE, India explored the use of rupees to trade non-oil commodities.
That's what, yeah.
Russia and Iran worked together to launch a cryptocurrency backed by gold. Despite these movements, few expect to see the end of the dollar's global sovereign status anytime soon. Currently, central banks still hold 60% of their foreign exchange reserves in dollars. So when I say that it's somewhat, FUD that we're moving to de-dollarization, like there's still a lot of people holding the US dollar. But the next chart, and this is great visual if you're watching it, which is this one, which is showing the visual rise of the US dollar since the 19th century. And you can actually see over time.
Visual capitalist.
Yeah, you can see it changing. So there's up until 1914, the US dollar is not even on the chart. See it? And then in 1918, it kicks off and you can see it's climbing exponentially. So by 1923, it's at like 60% of the total currency worldwide. And then you can see it ebbs all the way down to 35%, back up to 40, 33, 32.
World War I. Now we're heading to World War II.
Yep.
Interesting.
So it gets down to 22%, circa 15% World War II. And then coming out of World War II, it literally just goes on a freaking tear. And it goes all the way up until now 1955, it's like 50%. Uh-huh. This will run us all the way to 2022. So let's just, you can, if you scroll down a little bit, Cole, you can actually jump forward. Nope, go up. The bottom of that, hover. There you go. It's just a GIF. Yeah. So circa 2022, it's back to 58.4%. And that's kind of where we're at today still, right?
Wow. So I guess the thing that I think about is it's easy to be, it's easy without really looking at it for it to be an alarming thing.
Right.
When it really needs to be that of a threatening thing. And you have time to prepare, to position, to do the things that you need to do for your company and your employees.
Yes. And we're talking about the dollar globally, right? But that still doesn't really impact us at home. Like one of the things that makes America great is entrepreneurship, capitalism, laissez-faire, the ability to just start something from scratch, right? We do speak the same language, right? So you can go from San Diego to New York and talk the same thing, unlike China where you go from Eastern to Western China and it's different worlds, right?
Correct. Or Africa. And it's,
yeah, exactly. So those things are in our favor. So, sometimes I think entrepreneurs, especially if you're listening to this and you're aspiring, we get kind of frozen and we're waiting for the right time. There's never going to be a right time, but information like this helps you get your head wrapped around it and build your confidence so that you can keep kind of navigating these waters because they're happening whether you like them or not. Right? True. And there's a high, there's a fallacy in the security of a salary, right? So if you're mid-career professional, you've been at it for 7 to 10 years and you're maybe getting that itch to take the leap, I would say now is probably the best time to do it, but ultimately there's never a right time.
Wise words, man. Well, shall we talk about another thing that people aren't doing?
Yeah. Well, so this also, we're talking about where we're at societally. We're talking about where we're at, economically from a dollar standpoint. And it kind of segues into what are some of the other things that happen at the end of cycles like this and how can they go really, really wrong? And so I saw this Twitter post, which is something that I've been aware of, talking about fertility rates.
Yeah, it's definitely become, ironically, he says no one's talking about it, but it's definitely become more prevalent in conversations.
It is. And if you do study geopolitics, like that's something that's very interesting to me. You read the books, you listen to the people who are the authorities there, you see this trend, right? So here's what the post says. It says, the biggest story of our lifetime no one is talking about, coming from Justin Hart. Shout out Justin Hart. When we hit 1.3, it's the lowest low, a demographer's term. No society in history of the world has ever come back from that level. Greece, Italy, Japan, Ukraine, Hong Kong, most of Europe. It says the article snapshot says U.S. fertility rate falls to record low. Fewer babies were born in 2023 than any year since 1979. 1979 being, almost 40 years after the end of World War II. Oh. And then the little snippet says, American women are giving birth at record low rates. The fertility rate fell to 1.62 births per woman in 2023, a 2% decline from a year earlier. Federal data released Thursday showed it's the lowest rate recorded since the government began tracking it in the 1930s. So why is this a problem and why should we be concerned as a society, as entrepreneurs here in the United States?
Well, I mean, just thinking business and culturally, if you don't have children, you don't have future. You don't have a future. You don't have future generations. You don't have the cycles of life, the security, the caring, the provision. Like you don't have that. You die off.
And some of the things that we're seeing, like Russia, China, where they have an older population that's now higher population of old people than young people.
Right.
And that's a challenge in a workforce. Right? Because you don't have people to step up and care for them. Simultaneously, the burden from the older generation is now weighing on the younger generation
outnumbered
by way of taxes, right? And so we run that risk. Not only are people getting married later, having kids later, but they're also just having less children.
Dinks.
Would you say?
Dinks. You remember those videos popping up recently? We're dinks. Double income, no kids.
Oh, yeah.
And we're proud about it.
Yeah. And hey, more power to you, but there is some necessity culturally to having kids. One of the things that happened in Russia, according to my research, is Russia's a pretty rough place, right? It's very barren and very spread out. And so if you lived out in the middle of nowhere, like having kids became a necessity because you needed people to help work the land and do all that. Well, as the cities started to form up and people started to move into the cities, the need to have as many children went down, which is where we're at today. I mean, we live in a society and an economy where, in a couple hours, you can order something on Amazon. It shows up on your front door, right? And so the need to have a large family has gone down substantially. But the bigger picture that's missed is generational, that'll probably affect 50, 60, 70 years from now, maybe the next generational cycle when we're gone from this earth, is will there be more old people than there are young people?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer.
Well, and when you think about the children, the one thing about children is that in healthy settings, children embody the positive values that go forth that make a nation what it is.
Right.
So if you lose that,
Yeah.
you are actually participating in losing the nation. And so, like we saw in our clip last week, right, where the gentleman was like, look, we're coming to your country and we're having more kids than you.
Yep.
So we're going to take over your country by way of multiplying our value bearers in your nation.
Yep.
And so
I think it's interesting too, just like the generation that came up behind me, like 2003 was the last year that kind of the world existed without social media. And so the power of being connected also has a negative impact is you just see so much horror, like bad stuff happening in the world, that there's this generation that's like, man, I don't want to bring up kids in this world.
Dude, it's so funny that you bring up an important point, the power of media, because even, I have 4 children and people think I'm Mormon or something, but one of the things you see is the power of media, to your point. Most people, a lot of women live lives where they're actually terrified of childbearing or bringing a child, literally the actual labor, pregnancy. Because what do the movies show you? You did this to me, all this stuff. And it's like, no wonder you don't want to have children. Why would you want that? You've seen it a million times.
I think it's also just a testament to where we're at culturally.
Right. Oh, 100%.
So the biggest problem in our country today, in my personal opinion, is there's a lack of personal responsibility or accountability. So the idea of having to be responsible for someone else's life is incredibly terrifying to these people because they have been raised with radical individualism. Let me do me. You may take care of me. Self-love. I'm the most important thing in the room. Where the generation that I grew up with and the generation older than us was do what's better for society as a whole. And I do see another wave of that kind of happening, like the generation below the Gen Zers, probably like middle school, like my kids' age, because they're being raised by people like us, right? Is it alpha? Is that what it is? Okay. So again, these cycles happen. We just haven't been alive long enough to experience them. Yeah. And so we're in the middle of another one. We're in what I would consider to be the trough of this bell curve and probably the hardest time. But if you're an entrepreneur, now is the greatest opportunity to take advantage of some of these things. And so a prime example, and I kind of segueing off of that into the next topic, is just this great Twitter post, right? So obviously we're on a mission. We're building technology to serve business acquisition marketplace, to build broker technology, to help the world of M&A, because that entire world is just antiquated in tech. And it all kind of stems around this idea that there's this massive opportunity to be buying businesses. This comes from Logan Graff, and he put out this post with this crazy statistic that says 75% of CPAs hit retirement age 4 years ago. With fewer and fewer students signing up for accounting degrees every year, CPAs are going to become an endangered species. And that kind of segued into an article that we included in the newsletter last night which was just talking about how baby boomers own, a large majority of the companies out there. And there's tons and tons of businesses that are ripe for reinvention. But this is what I wanted to really bring up and kind of showcase for those of you that are aspiring entrepreneurs who are entrepreneurs, or who want to go and buy more businesses, bolt on stuff, or expand your footprint. Just the power and the impact that you guys ultimately have on the world around us, right? And that's why this whole podcast exists. Is we're not just here to talk about stuff and complain as much as it is to empower you that you guys are the change. You're the change makers, right? We have the ability to change the world around us by just creating jobs, right? And so this is a study, or this is an article that comes from Elevon, which is actually a credit card provider processor. But it says how independent businesses help our economy. So it says, according to U.S. Small Business Administration, small companies generate 1.5 million jobs a year and account for 64% of new jobs in America. Small businesses also contribute 44% of the U.S. economic activity. So as the number of new businesses grows, so does their economic contribution. And I would add to that as these businesses get ready to trade hands from the retiring generation, it requires people like us to step up and buy them to keep those jobs active in the market. This article also says small businesses help support the local economy. So by shopping small, you not only help up and coming business owners, but the local economy as well. If a person were to spend $100 at a local business, it's estimated about 68% of that stays within their local economy. If they spent that same amount at a larger business, around 48% would stay. So if that's the difference between you buying at Amazon and you buying from, the local boutique, right, for example. Number 2 was charitable and innovative contributions. So small businesses not only contribute economic benefits to their community, but also charitable and innovative ones as well. Research shows that 50% of small business owners donate to charity, with 42% of that portion donating up to $1,000. Along with the charitable donations, independent businesses also produce 16 times more new patents per employee in comparison to large patenting firms. And then number 3, boost environmental sustainability. Independent businesses not only provide economic benefit, but environmental ones as well. Big national chains can cause large environmental impact, but they outsource many of their products, which requires lots of transportation. Small businesses often source their products locally, which is more sustainable, help reduce the environment effect caused by vast amounts of transportation. And so kind of the whole point to all of this is we can sit and bitch about the economy. We can sit and talk about why the dollar's bad, what's happening with our government printing money, blah, 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 blah. But the truth is it's really up to us to get out there and do something about it.
Well, and you see too, that literally without being hyperbolic, small business entrepreneurship is the way.
It is. If you can make a ton of impact. Not everybody has to go be Elon Musk.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not everybody has to be the next Jeff Bezos. In fact, the majority of you aren't. The majority of us aren't. We're just going to end up in boring businesses, helping people within call it, 10 to 100 mile radius from where we live.
You're going to help them live prosperous, secure lives.
Correct.
While they have babies, tons of them.
Lots of them. and we do talk about politics on this podcast, but the other point of that is entrepreneurs are the ones that are investing in schools. Entrepreneurs are the ones that are building the libraries. Entrepreneurs are the ones that are doing the development and partnering with the local municipality in order to, do some big development that they can't afford to do on their own.
Correct.
And so it is up to us. We are the change makers.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this new AI safety board coming by way. Okay. By the way, the announcement came.
Safety board.
So let's, before we jump into this, just for context, this came by way of an announcement by the Department of Homeland Security. Mayorkas brought forth this announcement that this new AI safety board is coming out. So we got a couple of tweets. They feature the same content, but the framing is different on both. But we'll start with this one from Bindu Reddy on X. She says, the current administration brought all these closed AI folks together to create an AI safety board. Noticeably absent from this list are 2 of the most prominent leaders in this space, Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. She says, this is absolutely terrifying, to say the least. And then if you can, pull up the other clip of the same guy, of the same, he says, this is Gavin Baker. He says, I can't decide whether this is funny, ridiculous, or sad that the CEOs of the Occidental Petroleum and Delta Airlines are on the new AI safety board. Less than half of the 22 members have any real AI knowledge. Also, odds also odd that it's not even vaguely bipartisan, has 0 open source AI CEOs like Zuckerberg and Elon, who have been the highest profile advocates for AI safety over the last 10 years. The incumbents will be lobbying hard against open source, which would be terrible policy that maximizes the odds of a world with 2 to 3 dominant AIs, which is the riskiest scenario in his opinion. So they roll out this board. We got Sam Altman. We got, notably, we got Sam Altman. We got Satya Nadella of Microsoft. Shantanu Narayan, who's the chair and CEO of Adobe.
Oh, thank God we got Bruce Harrell on there, Merrill, mayor of Seattle.
Dude, Bruce is doing good for himself. He's killing it, whoever he is.
What is Bruce doing on there? Bruce, man, sit down.
We need to keep an eye on Bruce. Bruce knows something we don't know. He's up there with Bill Gates, right? He's in the same state. So we got Sundar Pichai of Alphabet. And so there are some heavy hitters there, but this is interesting just from the standpoint of that our government's position is we're going to, come in and be the regulators and the safety providers of this innovative technology that entrepreneurs will have to deal with. And so
it's always interesting when the government steps in for our safety,
Yeah. And really, I pulled it in one from the irony of like, you look at Elon Musk, he's been very vocal over the last several years about the role that AI can play, good and bad. Yeah. And so I just find it interesting that this just further pushes this point that entrepreneurs have to embrace this AI revolution.
Yeah, it's here to stay.
And even more so than a board, take their own AI, artificial intelligence safety, into their own hands.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are putting it off because it's scary. It's something new. It feels arduous. I don't want to adopt it. Very similar to what happened with email, internet, so on and so forth. It is here to stay. So if you're at least, maybe if you're at the tail end of your career, you're getting ready to sell your business, not as important to you. Correct. Whatever, man. Ditch Facebook, go buy a boat, fish all day.
Well, I don't know with them capital gains. I don't know.
Yeah. Sell your business this year before 2025.
Get it done.
But if you are still in the thick of it, call it, mid-career, we'll call it 20s to mid-50s, you need to embrace this. It's here to stay.
And so one person who has embraced it, over a decade now, billionaire entrepreneur and investor, Mark Cuban.
Yep.
And I think he's onto something here with his boot camp. And really this feature comes by way of Go Banking Rates. And they lead the headline, Mark Cuban's AI boot camps. He's building wealth through ChatGPT, enabling others to build wealth through ChatGPT. Articles leads out for a man who started his business career at 12 years old by selling trash bags door to door. Cuban has done all right for himself. That's the obvious no-brainer, biggest in the history of the world. Through his AI boot camps, the Shark Tank star has a deal for motivated students around the nation. Learn about the most recent developments in ChatGPT and other AI sectors and discover how they can use these tech tools to make a more exciting, better future for themselves and society in general. So for entrepreneurs out there, learn about recent developments in ChatGPT and other AI sectors. Listen to our podcast we had with Brett Romberg and discover how you can use AI to make a more exciting, better servicing business, more efficient systems, better experience for your customers and your employees through AI and society in general.
Yeah. What's funny is we just talked about this on the last podcast. Like, there's an opportunity there. Who's going to go and actually create this AI education while he's doing it? He's probably using AI to teach AI, which is incredible because the way that the large language models for conversational AI have developed, it's pretty crazy. You can ask it real-time questions and it'll give you feedback straight away.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, as the article points out, Mark Cuban believes that artificial intelligence will have a greater impact on our world. We know that. But he talks in particular about the future. So kids, employees, employment, hiring, these things. And so he's putting his money where his mouth is.
This is a dude who lived through the dot-com bubble, who saw firsthand what happened when people didn't adopt the internet and when people did. Yeah. And benefited greatly from that.
Well, I was actually watching clips 7 years ago of Mark Cuban saying like, hey, I'm learning about language models right now and artificial intelligence, and that's why I'm going to win in a decade from now.
Yeah.
And so that window is still here for us to, as entrepreneurs, to lay hold of this and drive forward entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So, But there is a downside, right? And then here's the downside. AI, which to the credit of the AI Safety Board, I think this is why initiatives like this come forth, because we're going to hear the story here from Alex Griswold on X, 1.3 million views just in the last couple of days. He says, absolute wild story. A Baltimore County principal was seemingly caught on recorded audio making blatant racist and anti-Semitic comments. But after investigation, it was proved that the audio was fake. It was AI generated in a plot by the school's former athletic director. So they're building the case for the AI Safety Board. We won't dive into the article, but nonetheless.
So, but I'm going to get, for those of you who don't create content, you guys are in the clear because there's no model that they can feed you into. But for guys like me and Darius, this is actually a real issue.
I can't wait till I get an AI clone.
Ooh, okay.
Hey.
What if they're saying some just wild stuff?
Bring it on, dude. Bring it on.
But yeah, therein lies the risk of that. So if we don't adopt it, we don't embrace it, we don't even understand when we're being duped.
Yeah.
I mean, this is already happening with scammers.
Yeah.
Scammers have been scamming people forever, right? Except they'd be calling you with an Indian accent. And now they can use AI to cover up their accent and sound like an American.
Hey, this is Bruce calling from.
Hey, this is Bruce from Visa, MasterCard.
Where I got Bruce from.
Yeah.
But, so it's a wild world that we live in, but it's exciting, man. And so like to the entrepreneur, that spirit of entrepreneurship is, as we're actually going to look at this later, but the spirit of entrepreneurship is one that embraces these resources and technologies available and the constraints that come with them to do good. And so it's really exciting times here, except for the fact that you literally don't have Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg on the board. Like two of the biggest people who are for this and for doing it the right way. So, and so artificial intelligence is obviously not going to stop at the business world. It's going to jump into the trades. But one thing it won't necessarily do right now, based as we looked at the robots and stuff last week, is people still have to do the work.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing as we look at this next story is that Gen Z is veering over to the trades, moving away to a better alternative than, typical post-secondary education.
And my brother's a prime example. So my brother's 12 years younger than me, and he decided to just go straight into landscaping.
Yeah.
And quickly, because he's a smart guy, very talented when it comes to working with his hands, kind of leapfrogged the rest of the employees to the top of the ladder because he was smart, intelligent, had leadership skills, had been working on a job site before, project managed jobs. And so quickly moved to the top of this company. Yeah. You're going to see more and more and more of that.
And it's good news for those entrepreneurs who are in the trades. And so this article comes by way of Entrepreneur Magazine. I'm going to jump right into the main piece. It says, it's no secret that Gen Z is entrepreneurial, with research showing that the majority would take a social media creator job over a standard 9-to-5. Nearly half are going the extra mile by starting side hustles to be able to afford the normal stuff. Well, now research shows that trade school could also play into Gen Z's entrepreneurial aspirations, especially with rising AI capabilities and growing education costs. According to a January National Student Clearinghouse report, vocational community college enrollment has grown 16% since 2018. Growth was concentrated mainly in cities and suburbs, which recorded 3.5 and 3.7 respective increases in students opting for trade programs. Last year's version of the report found that enrollment in programs across construction, culinary, and mechanic trades increased 19.3%, 12.7%, and 11.5% respectively. And there's a quote here. We're seeing that 75% of Gen Z is saying that we are interested in being an entrepreneur. This comes by way of Ken Coleman of the Ramsey Show. They want to work for themselves. Trades offer a quicker, cheaper path to being able to work for themselves, create jobs for other people, and plug into which is the real backbone of our economy, small business.
And like we always talk about, the opportunity to buy these businesses from baby boomers is very, very strong.
Yes.
This is the type of business that mechanics, contracting, those businesses were pretty much dominated by the boomers for the last 40 years.
Right.
And so those need owners. So if you got the skill, because it's not as easy, like buying a plumbing company is not just as easy as wanting to and having the money. You also need to be able to get the licensing or at least know how to structure the business in a way so that you have people who have licenses that allow you to operate the company. But if you go to trade school, for a couple of years and come out with your license and then get into an organization and work for somebody and then go buy a company. Wow, man, you are in the driver's seat to leapfrog.
Right.
Instead of putting whatever 200 grand into
Columbia University,
but 200 grand with an SBA loan to go buy a $3 million business, printing $650,000 a year in net income and be stepping into some serious cash flow.
Well, it makes me think too, with the entrepreneurs currently in those seats that one day may want to be out of those seats. We're seeing like they pointed out, that interest in AI. So you see like there's a pathway here to bring this next generation of entrepreneurs into the fold, because clearly they're going to see so many of the things that they've been putting their trust in around them are crumbling.
Yep.
And so,
they'll be the innovators, right? They'll bring social media,
right,
better marketing practice, content, technology into the ecosystem, because it's just what they grew up with. It's just what they're used to. So rather than being afraid of it, they're going to be working as quickly as possible to try to adopt it and integrate it into their business.
Yeah.
And so, that's where the revolution comes from. And that's what we were talking about earlier. CPAs is the same kind of thing. That's another industry that's ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
So it's going to be pretty interesting over the next 20 years. I personally think it's one of the greatest times to build wealth in this country, unlike anything we've ever seen.
Yeah.
This wealth transfer, buying businesses, specifically in the trades.
Well, there's a second clip we have with in this segment talking about the Gen Z choosing trades. There was this clip. So this clip was floating around several weeks ago, and we didn't pull it on, but it came back up on my feed, and I wanted to pull it in because I labeled it the spirit of entrepreneurship as we talk about, this spirit of entrepreneurship that's going to be heading into the trades and really keeping the necessary industries alive. But I really appreciated this video of this guy really giving simple game, taking away excuses. And I think this same thing extends to Gen Z as we're talking about them.
You got $10? Yeah? Let me put you on something real quick. This right here is a 4x4. You're going to buy you a 4x4, and I'm going to show you what to do with it to make it kill.
$10.80.
Get home, you're going to get your speed square, and you're going to draw a straight line every half an inch all the way down the whole length of the board like this. Half an inch. Half an inch. Then you're left with a bunch of squares like this. Then get you a sander, and you're going to go over all of them on both sides and on the edges and get them as smooth as you can. And then you're going to Google wooden drink coasters, and you're going to see that roughly average they sell for about $20 a 4-pack. So that $10 12-foot 4x4 you bought, you can make 288 cuts out of that piece. And then with those 288, you put them in bundles of 4. Just like that, you got 72 bundles. And if you do 72 times 20 on average, that's $1,440 that you can make off of one $10 investment. There ain't no excuse for anybody to be broke.
That is the spirit of entrepreneurship,
It's the
right
spirit
there.
of entrepreneurship.
Except he's playing in the world of the trades, which is foreign to a lot of these kids who've never done that before.
Right.
My dad would be looking at that going, huh, that's actually pretty smart. And he would know exactly what to do, right?
Yeah.
He's got the tools, he's got the equipment to go and got some boards. In fact, you should send it to me. I'll send it to him and say, get on, make $1,400 a month. Let's go.
And you just see like, that's it right there. That's going to be the appealing nature because this functions, this works,
right?
Not all the stuff we're seeing. I'm going to go be an art history and theater major with $300,000 of debt and then have no job.
Okay. Art history, theater major. Yeah, that's a real thing.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
What are you going to do with that, man?
I mean,
but they feel entitled once they get it that they should be, making bank.
Well, and
they don't understand the trade-off in value, right? And what value do you bring to the marketplace?
And what value does this experience in and of itself lend to my life? Which is actually, as we transition to this, you guys have been, you may or may not, because you're out there building businesses, know a lot of what's happening over, across many campuses in our nation right now with these pro-Palestinian protests. We're going to jump into this because as entrepreneurs, this is something you, in fact, have to think about. Maybe you have children. Maybe you make considerable charitable contributions to institutions around you. But we're going to look at some of what's happening, in particular, these pro-Palestinian protests that have been going on for the last week and a half. starting at Columbia University, have been producing some pretty wacky efforts and some poor responses, with it culminating recently with now we're seeing Jewish students actually being denied entry into the very schools that their parents, some business owners and entrepreneurs, are paying tuition for.
Yeah. And going back to the very first clip we showed on this pod, which is most of these kids don't even know where they're out there.
Right. And so this clip we're going to listen to is a parent. So UCLA gave them permission to share this. And so this is the parent of a Jewish student who is being denied entry at an institution that they are paying for. And I'm sure one of their parents is probably a business owner in LA somewhere in California.
They said because he's Jewish, he cannot enter that area, and that they won't issue him a wristband.
So that wasn't a university thing. That's probably the protesters that are out there.
Right. So are the protesters allowed to not allow a student who pays tuition access to their class in the library?
No, they're not allowed, but unfortunately they have kind of taken over that little area right there. But is there any other entrance that your son can enter through?
No, they are barricading every area for him to get into. And with all due respect, why is that even tolerated? Like, why should a Jewish kid have to go to another entrance?
It's not. I don't know if I'm going to say it's tolerated, but unfortunately the police are not intervening with that right now. And this is coming from the university, so if you had any questions or concern, you would take it with the university itself.
So the university has taken a stance that they will not, in fact, allow or help Jewish students get to their classes. That this is going to be tolerated.
They have. We've received a directive to not intervene at this time. Yes.
Okay.
And what is what point?
It's freaking wild.
It's wild. And so as we'll look at several different clips here in these next few minutes, but the overarching point is that you entrepreneurs are building businesses. You're sending your kids to these institutions. You're thinking about candidates coming from some of these institutions doing this thing. And so
this is the future workforce.
This is the future workforce. And so there's this bigger conversation that correlates with what we were just talking about, which is like, is this the investment we need to be making in these institutions, these universities, sending our kids there?
No.
Or do we need to actually be back in the trades, back in our communities, back solving problems, learning skills and building relationships, embracing AI, all of this different stuff? And so, so that was one clip there. But just for context, if you don't follow what's been going on, students have been creating what's called encampments. Think Occupy Wall Street a couple of years ago. And
think Seattle.
Think Seattle, the Chaz failed experiment.
That was beautiful.
Murder. So think that started taking place, started at Columbia University, authorities stepped in, that then proceeded to spread across many universities in our states, Texas, Georgia, up and down the East Coast, UCLA, as we just noted, USC. And what's happening is these students are occupying university property in the name of telling university administrators that they need to divest any of the university's financials attachments to Israel.
Yeah.
And so it's a bunch of nonsense.
So they don't want to accept any Jewish tuition, effectively?
Exactly. And now
sounds pretty racist to me.
Yeah, now it's actually moved to the point where they're denying Jewish students entry. A couple have been attacked. But the correlation is like these are your future employees. These are places you're going to be sending your kids with the business. Not you, right? But like these are the choices our entrepreneurs have to make. And so we call it into question.
Yeah, if you don't speak on it, it will show up on your doorstep, 100%. Or it'll infiltrate your company, and you'll be surrounded by a bunch of these knuckleheads who have taken no risk to build the company that you have, and they will tear it from the inside down.
Yeah, right. And so there's one image I want to share with you guys. There's an image there of, that one right there with the flag. So over the weekend, they raised up a Palestinian flag at Harvard, and they put a keffiyeh around the neck of John Harvard. And it's these kinds of things that, to your point, this is knocking on the doorstep of many people who wanted to just stay there and build their businesses. And
isn't institutions where you go and learn to then go into the workforce to add value to the world? This used to be the training ground, right? So yeah, it's coming. It is coming. These people are coming. You can tell by who is using the pronouns in their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, and it's just this overall thing of like these institutions aren't what they used to be. So will you continue to make these investments, or will you continue to ignore what's happening? Will you continue to not prepare your children and your family for what's happening? Because part of what made universities unique is that university piece. It's actually out of the many one, the exchange of ideas. And now what we've seen is this radical, it's really just Marxism and anarchy that they're really trying to produce, and the pending fall of the West by some Eastern cultures that shall not be named at the moment because I don't feel like getting my cortisol levels elevated. But overall, as entrepreneurs, you guys have to think about this thing. To Samson's point, this isn't going to stay away from your doorstep. This isn't going to stay away from encroaching upon your children and the values and things that you've been espousing. And so before you write that check to the institution, before you go to that gala, before you send your child there, you got some choices and things you need to be thinking about. And then also even within your business to attract the talent we see that's probably going to be looking and saying, I'm not going to this school. I'm going to the trades.
Yeah. And just on top of that, college has stopped teaching you how to be a value creator.
Yeah.
Right. So it's teaching you what to think. Doesn't teach you how to be a value creator. So like in my household, we're raising entrepreneurial kids.
Right.
My kids want to make money. They're like, hey, we're going to go make some jewelry and we're going to go knock doors and then we're going to make money that way. And then we'll have money to go on this vacation or to spend on this vacation so that we don't have to ask dad for money. My kids have learned how to create value, how to create something from nothing, and how to think for themselves and be value adders. Right. So I don't know if you're an entrepreneur, like with all seriousness, like why are you sending your kids to these institutions?
Correct.
Like don't support that crap.
Right.
It's craziness, man.
And that's the only reason why these things even continue to exist.
They come back like this. Yeah. They are economic machines.
Right.
Like they are taking money and churning money and growing endowments that allow the university to exist in perpetuity. And we just keep sending people there.
Right. It won't be long. It's falling apart. So we'll move on to this last piece here about Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
So Caitlin Clark,
who we've been talking about a lot.
We've been talking about a lot.
Who got the weakest rookie contract ever. But we knew she was going to get some sponsorship deals.
Yeah, absolutely. So Caitlin Clark had a $400K contract despite being the number one pick. But okay, so side note, she couldn't get paid more than that because the organization, her employer, can't pay her more than that.
Yeah, that's what they give all rookies. Yeah.
All right. But she...
Caitlin Clark, the girl just made $28 million with Nike. She's getting a signature shoe. Unfortunately, she is still left to deal with all of the critics. Now, why are there critics? Well, because Caitlin Clark is white. There's a USA Today writer, his name is Mike Freeman, and he put up this post. No black WNBA players have a signature shoe. Jamel Hill, she's whining that Caitlin Clark wasn't deserving of the shoe deal. It's easy to see why Caitlin Clark was the one chosen to have the shoe deal. Clearly, there's a marketability here. Nike clearly has a knack for picking the right players to have signature shoes that are going to sell and sell well. So when they think to themselves, who should we give a signature shoe deal to? Who is going to help us generate the most revenue possible? Caitlin Clark obviously comes to mind. I think we all can realize that Caitlin Clark is more than deserving of a shoe deal. This has nothing to do with her skin color. And for all the people trying to make a stink about it, please just shut your mouths because you're making a bigger deal out of this than it needs to be.
Okay, can I rebuttal to that with another short?
Yeah.
It's not in here, Cole. You're going to have to look it up. It is, it's 50 Cent talking about how rap music is black music and how Eminem is just better at it.
Hip hop is black music, without question. And unfortunately for some people, it's tough to accept that you got a white artist that does it better than black artists. That's what it is.
So
it's effectively what's happening, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's our sport. We're supposed to be good at it. I will say as a white boy, I love to see, like in the NFL, I'm seeing these white boys run like 4.4s and 4.3s now. I'm like, yes, finally, because I wasn't that dude. But that, now they're getting the training. They're competing with other faster kids. They're, and so now like being a fast white guy is like becoming a thing again. It used to be like all white guys are slow, or in the 90s, white man can't jump.
Yeah.
So this is a perennial problem, but none of them understand the bigger component there, which is Caitlin Clark has a platform.
Yeah.
She has reach. She has an audience. And so the reason she got a $28 million signature shoe deal
because they don't sell
is because they're going to sell. All of her jerseys sold out in the first day.
Right.
Like, you think people were tuning in and the March Madness got higher viewership than the men's? The women's got higher viewership than the men's because Caitlin Clark was or was not playing. It was because she was playing.
Right.
She has reach. She was doing 3.1 million in NIL deals. So these people just don't understand business, and they want to make everything a freaking social issue. It's crazy.
Dude, the fact of the matter is, business, it's should be based on merit. Like, you show up, you perform. And that's the customer. It's funny. The customer lives and breathes on merit also. They might not say it, but if the little girls and boys want to rock Caitlin's shoes, just like NBA players are wearing Sabrina Ionescu's shoes, because they're good and they are good at playing basketball.
Or why people are still wearing J's today.
Yeah.
Because the dude's a legend.
Yeah, no one complains when it's the other way around, right? No one complains when a bunch of white kids are buying LeBron shoes, right?
Or if a white kid got a golf contract. They're not talking about that, right? Because it's like, oh, you stay in the lane. That's a white person's sport. Right. So stupid.
No, it's nonsense. And I think for the entrepreneurs out there, guys, like, continue to build your businesses the right way. Continue to build the relationships with people who have platforms that espouse your values and are going to help you make a positive contribution in the lives of those people, your employees, your consumers that are going to be satisfied with the product that they want, that helps them do whatever it is that they want to do in buying your product. And no one can fault you for that.
Yeah, bet.
So this has been fun today, man.
Yeah, it was good.
It was good.
We talked a lot about market economics, got into a little bit of what's happening socially with the workforce coming up, and then closed it out with the final reminder that build a platform, build brand. It does matter, and it will carry forward.
Yeah. And so we appreciate your time today. Leave us a comment, throw out some questions, some ideas, let us know some stories. But one of the things I want to ask you guys to do is to actually go to pain2profits.co and subscribe to our newsletter. Because if you're listening to this pod, that means you are in business and you're trying to see good things happen. And we put out a weekly newsletter that is just for you. And it's going to help you grow your business. It's going to help you have a pulse on things, just like this podcast does. And it's also something to share with those who are in business alongside you. So until next time, guys, take care.